Rachel is suing Ariana and Tom, claiming that you took part in revenge porn. What's the status of the lawsuit?
They can't answer it. It's ridiculous.
I understand. I've never done anything to her. Like, why I'm constantly being
brought back into this.
Yes.
It's one thing for her to come after me, but to come after Ariana, I'm questioning if she has a fucking soul. Like, it's insane.
Wondering what's going on in the courtroom between Rachel, Tom and Ariana? Well, just because they can't speak about it doesn't mean you have to go without. As the fallout from Sandoval continues off-screen, we're here to give you the rundown on all the drama, from lawsuits to verdicts, charges, and next steps. After covering Ariana's response last week, in this video we'll be diving into Tom's side of the case, which includes a 28-page lawsuit and a lot of complicated legalese which we've trimmed down and summarised to bring you all the juicy details. Before we dive in, here's a reminder to subscribe if you're new. This channel is all about diving into the most talked about Bravo news and headlines, so if you're a Bravo addict like me, don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date with all the latest on-screen and off-screen drama. Turn on notifications and let me know what you want to see me cover next in the comments. Anyway, let's get into this outrageously long lawsuit. Just 1 week ago, on Friday 24th of May, Tom, backed by his 28-page legal document and high-flying attorneys, faced Rachel in court to fight back against her lawsuit where she accused him and Ariana of revenge porn, invasion of privacy, eavesdropping, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The verdict? A judge ruled that Rachel will be allowed to continue pursuing her claims for eavesdropping and invasion of privacy, though the judge did consider wiping the charge for intentional infliction of emotional distress, giving Rachel 20 days to amend her complaint and provide sufficient evidence of this charge. We'll get into the judge's ruling in more detail later. First, let's start with how we got here, before we dive into what will happen next for Tom, Ariana, and Rachel in their never-ending courtroom dramas. Let's start with a recap of the charges brought against Tom. If you're already clear on Tom's charges, I've added chapters in so you can skip ahead to the point marked below to dive straight into his 28-page lawsuit that led to the verdict. So, on the 19th of February 2024, Rachel filed a 19-page lawsuit against Tom, Ariana, and unnamed does 1 to 50 in the Superior Court of the state of California. We've already done a 2-part deep dive into Rachel's filing and a rundown of Ariana's response filed on the 26th of April. So if you want the detailed backstory, make sure you check out those videos, which will be linked below. In this suit, Rachel accused Tom of eavesdropping, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The eavesdropping charge, in summary, states that, unbeknownst to Leviss and without her consent, Sandoval recorded their communications, which were private and confidential, and showed her in a state of undress and engaged in sex acts. It claims that Rachel had not been informed that Sandoval was recording their communications, nor did Sandoval obtain Leviss's consent to be recorded. She argues for punitive damages, statutory damages, actual damages, injunctive relief, and equitable relief to compensate her for the injury caused by Sandoval's acts, as well as to punish him and to deter such conduct in the future. The next charge against Tom for invasion of privacy basically says that Sandoval invaded Leviss's privacy by, among other things, secretly recording their private communications and capturing sexually explicit footage of Leviss without her knowledge or consent in a manner highly offensive to a reasonable person. Again, she seeks damages and punitive damages in an amount to be proven at trial. The final charge brought by Rachel against Tom is for intentional infliction of emotional distress. This one says, in doing the things and acts described herein, Sandoval and Madix engaged in extreme and outrageous conduct that transcended the bounds of human decency, and claims Leviss has suffered emotional distress as a result of the actions committed by Sandoval and Madix herein described, including severe emotional distress, physical manifestations of emotional distress, anxiety, shock, embarrassment, loss of self-esteem, disgrace, humiliation, powerlessness, sleeplessness, and loss of enjoyment of life. Leviss's severe emotional distress prevents her from performing daily activities and obtaining the full enjoyment of life. Again, she seeks damages for emotional distress, anxiety, pain, fear, physical injuries, medical expenses, and financial losses, as well as punitive damages. Rachel then ended her document by asking that the defendants, Tom and Ariana, destroy, delete, and stop distributing the videos of her intimate body parts or engaging in sexual acts. Now we're up to speed on the charges, let's dive into Tom's outrageously long and complicated response. So, on the 22nd of April 2024, just 4 days before Ariana filed her response, Tom filed his demurrer. For the non-lawyers out there, like me, I'll save you the time having to Google this. Basically, it's defined as an objection granting the factual basis of an opponent's point, but dismissing it as irrelevant or invalid. What does this mean? Basically, Tom isn't disputing the facts of Rachel's case. He admits he had the videotape saved on his phone from their FaceTime call, but he's arguing that having these videos isn't violating any of the penal codes Rachel brings against him in her case. He didn't eavesdrop, invade her privacy, or intentionally inflict emotional distress. Essentially, the demurrer claims that Rachel's story is irrelevant to the charges, and so the case should be dismissed on this basis. Interestingly, Tom is being represented by Matthew Garagos, acting under the Garagos Law Group, while Rachel is represented by his brother, Mark Garagos, acting under the firm Garagos and Garagos. I don't even know how to untangle that one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Anyway, Matthew Garagos starts this law filing with a summary of the demurrer to complaint. It begins by addressing the first cause of action, eavesdropping, and states that Rachel fails to state facts sufficient to constitute a cause of action, arguing that the specific penal code she is accusing him of violating does not protect a general right of privacy from unconsented videotaping and only protects sound-based or symbol-based communications, i.e. phone calls and texts. He also states that Rachel does not allege any facts showing that the parties' communications were confidential, and therefore Tom can't have eavesdropped on a non-confidential phone call. So the same thing happens for the next cause of action, invasion of privacy, where his argument once again is that Rachel fails to state facts sufficient to constitute a cause of action for invasion of privacy because she fails to allege any facts showing an intrusion. Rather, Tom argues, Rachel consented to being on FaceTime with him, so he didn't intrude on what she believed to be a private moment. There's also a lot of stuff brought up around Rachel being on a TV show and therefore knowing her actions would become public, and so this waives her rights or expectations of privacy, but we'll get into that a bit later. Finally, for the last cause of action, intentional infliction of emotional distress, you'll be surprised to hear that Tom and his lawyers state that Rachel fails to state facts sufficient to constitute a cause of action for this charge because she doesn't prove that his conduct was outrageous, done with the requisite intent, i.e. that he wanted to harm her, or that her injuries were actually and proximately caused by Tom's conduct. So basically, if she was injured physically and emotionally by the ordeal, it wasn't his fault or intention as he never leaked the videos. Following this brief summary, the lawsuit then lists Tom's request that his demurrer is sustained without leave to amend, meaning he wants the judge to agree with this whole document and not dispute any of his points, as well as that the defendant is awarded the costs of this action, i.e. Rachel pays for his legal fees, and the court grants such other and further relief that the court considers proper. Then we get into Tom's statement of events, which starts, "This civil case arises out of a sordid affair between plaintiff Rachel Leviss and defendant Tom Sandoval, two of the central figures in the widely publicised and popular reality television series entitled Vanderpump Rules. The affair, dubbed Scandoval, occurred while Sandoval was cohabiting with his longtime girlfriend, fellow cast member and co-defendant Ariana Madix. The affair came to light when Madix discovered explicit FaceTime videos of Leviss on Sandoval's phone." It continues, "After thrusting the vicissitudes of her life into the limelight for ongoing public consumption and critique from 2016 through 2023, Leviss has now filed the instant action against defendants Sandoval and Madix, complaining of being an object of public scorn and ridicule." Note the tone of sarcasm here, as Tom's attorney basically accuses Rachel of putting herself into this situation by joining the cast of Vanderpump Rules. Then, going back to Tom's statement on the reunion, it says that Rachel's lawsuit is a thinly veiled attempt to extend her fame and to rebrand herself as the victim, instead of the other woman, while denigrating her former friend Madix as a scorned woman and her former paramour Sandoval as predatory. It argues that to establish herself as the victim, Rachel's complaint contains irrelevant but incendiary allegations of Leviss's persecution by multiple non-parties, i.e. Bravo Media, Evolution Media, her former boyfriend James Kendi, Sheena Shea, and Andy Cohen, basically saying that in order to get her narrative across in the way she wanted it, she had to bring in so many other people into the suit that it's no longer about seeking damages against Tom and Ariana for their actions, because their actions alone would not be enough to make a case. To back up this statement, they add, "Notably, since November of 2023 to the present date, Leviss has actively maintained a provocative podcast, Rachel Goes Rogue, to further bend the narrative to her will." It then goes into a rundown of the proceedings, which starts, "On February 29th, 2024, Plaintiff Leviss filed a complaint asserting dubious and unsupported causes of action against defendant Sandoval. They argue that by being on the FaceTime call, Rachel created the videos of herself and willingly shared them with Tom, stating all of Leviss's claims against Sandoval are based on her allegation that Sandoval surreptitiously recorded 2 videos of Leviss in a state of undress and masturbating during their less than discreet public affair. However, these videos were created by Leviss and published by Leviss to Sandoval via a consensual exchange on FaceTime. i.e. their video calls. It continues, based on Leviss's own allegations, Sandoval merely saved private copies of the videos that Leviss had filmed and shared with him, and so she can't charge him for eavesdropping or invasion of privacy, as the filming and sharing of the videos was all consensual on Rachel's behalf. This is the main basis for the charges to be dropped and is repeated throughout the document. Interestingly, they then go on to shift the blame away from Tom and onto Ariana, in the most classic Tom gaslighting move. The document states, Leviss's complaint alleges the same 3 causes of action against Madix, with the addition of a claim for revenge porn. All of Leviss's claims against Madix arise out of her allegations that Madix found Leviss's explicit videos after searching through Sandoval's phone, and at a minimum, Madix circulated the explicit videos to herself and Leviss and informed production about what she had found. So basically, it was Rachel's fault for being on FaceTime with him, and Ariana's fault that these videos were found and talked about publicly. Tom is, as usual, obviously, completely innocent. Anyway, sarcasm aside, the document then goes on to highlight the timeline of events and starts by noting that before filing a demurrer, the demurring party, i.e. Tom and his attorneys, should meet and confer in person or by telephone with the party who filed the pleading, i.e. Rachel's team, for the purpose of determining whether an agreement can be reached that would resolve the objections to be raised in the demurrer. It then says, on April 9th, 2024, Tom's counsel Matthew Garagos sent Rachel's attorneys a letter explaining what Tom would be raising in the demurrer. Garagos also spoke with one of Rachel's attorneys over the phone on April 11th. There was no resolution after this letter and phone call, so Tom proceeded to file the demurrer. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty legalese and loophole finding, starting with the eavesdropping charge. So the first point states, Plaintiff Leviss's first cause of action for eavesdropping fails against defendant Sandoval because penal code does not protect a general right of privacy from unconsented videotaping and only protects sound-based or symbol-based communications. It says the words used in the statute, such as overhearing, eavesdropping, telephonic communication, and audible, indicate that the statute protects only the content of sound-based or symbol-based communications, not video. It then goes on to reference a previous case where it stated that it is listening in or eavesdropping upon private communications that the law seeks to remedy, not the taking of pictures of people engaged in conversation or other private conduct. It goes on to conclude that Leviss's most detailed description of the videos states in no uncertain terms that they do not contain communications, meaning voices or text messages, but are instead explicit videos that depict her in a state of undress and masturbating, concluding, accordingly, this cause of action fails against Sandoval as he did not technically violate those specific terms of the penal code, even though, morally, we all know his behaviour was disgusting. Next, another point around the eavesdropping charges raised. Plaintiff Leviss's first cause of action for eavesdropping fails against defendant Sandoval because plaintiff does not allege any facts showing that the parties' communications were confidential. This starts by providing a definition of eavesdropping as a person who intentionally and without the consent of all parties to a confidential communication uses an electronic amplifying or recording device to eavesdrop upon or record the confidential communication. It then uses Rachel's words against her, where she stated that, although purportedly secret, the affair was, in fact, well known to many cast members and suspected by others, and uses this to back up the claim that this videotaping therefore doesn't count as confidential communications, because their conduct was open and ostentatious, and because the storyline was front and centre in an ongoing reality series. Rachel can't have expected for these videotapings to be confidential. This point continues that by putting herself on Vanderpump Rules, Rachel subjected her private life to a broad relinquishment of rights under her contract with Bravo, so it's unclear whether the filming and exposure of her private affairs were to be the subject of the show's narrative plot, meaning that the line between her private conduct and fodder for a high-profile public reality television series is indisputably blurred. So, basically, by being on Vanderpump Rules and going on FaceTime, she's therefore failed to prove that she expected the communications to be confidential, which is key to filing any eavesdropping suit. We then move on to Tom's defense, against the invasion of privacy charge, which is titled, Plaintiff Leviss's third cause of action for invasion of privacy fails against defendant Sandoval because plaintiff does not allege any facts showing an intrusion by defendant Sandoval. This starts by reviewing Rachel's allegation, which was that Sandoval invaded Leviss's privacy by, among other things, secretly recording their private communications and capturing sexually explicit footage of Leviss without her knowledge or consent in a manner highly offensive to a reasonable person. It then goes on to outline the 4 types of invasion of privacy. It says that based on Leviss's allegations, the only invasion complained of is of the nature of a physical intrusion. And in order to prove actionable intrusion intrusion, the plaintiff must show the defendant penetrated some zone of physical or sensory privacy, which, given that they were on a consensual FaceTime call, Tom didn't breach any boundary regarding sensory surroundings or data. As with the other arguments, this one ends, Leviss fails to and cannot allege any facts showing that Sandoval committed an intrusion into her solitude or that Sandoval obtained unwanted access to data about Leviss. To the contrary, Leviss intended for Sandoval to see her explicit videos, Leviss made the videos for Sandoval, and Leviss shared the videos with Sandoval via a consensual exchange on FaceTime. On to the final points, and huge thanks for sticking with me if you've made it this far. For intentional infliction of emotional distress, Tom argues that this fails against defendant Sandoval because plaintiff does not allege any facts showing that Sandoval's conduct was outrageous, done with the requisite intent, or that her injuries were actually and proximately caused by Sandoval's conduct. Again, this starts with a definition of intentional infliction of emotional distress. It states that based on Rachel's own testimony, Sandoval merely saved private copies of the videos that Leviss filmed for Sandoval and that Leviss shared with Sandoval. This is not outrageous or extreme conduct exceeding all bounds of that tolerated in a civilized community. Therefore, he did not act outrageously according to this argument. It then says that to establish the first element for intentional infliction of emotional distress, the defendant's conduct must be intended to inflict injury or engaged in with the realization that injury will result. Continuing, Leviss states no facts showing that Sandoval acted with the intention of causing or reckless disregard for the probability of causing any emotional distress, repeating that the affair was carried out openly and that the videos were disseminated without the consent or authority of either Leviss or Sandoval. Therefore, he can't be accused of causing intentional emotional distress when he didn't even consent for the videos to be shared. It ends, lastly, there is no actual and proximate causation of Leviss's emotional distress by Sandoval's conduct. Leviss's emotional distress was allegedly caused by defendant Madix's discovery of the videos on Sandoval's phone and Leviss's belief that Madix distributed them and or showed them to others without Leviss's knowledge or consent. As Leviss does not allege Sandoval disseminated the videos, she can show no actual and proximate causation. Additionally, any emotional distress Leviss alleges to have suffered was also caused in large part by her decision to star in a salacious and drama-filled reality television series and to engage in an affair with her friend's longtime boyfriend. So once again, it throws blame back to Ariana for sharing the videos, allegedly, and Rachel for agreeing to be in the public eye in the first place. The document then goes on to summarise that the allegations against Thomas are uncertain, and the allegations which purport to state liability for eavesdropping, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress are uncertain because the line of demarcation between private conduct and the plot of an ongoing television reality series is wholly unclear based on the complaint. It is unclear what the terms of her contract dictated relative to her private life and what was to be deemed necessary material and or property of Bravo. Thus, the entire basis and foundation of her eavesdropping, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress causes of action against Sandoval are unclear. For this reason alone, Sandoval's demurrer should be sustained. So basically, it's Bravo's fault as well, and anyone's fault except Tom's. So, this is what Tom argued in court last Friday. Now, let's get into the verdict. As we mentioned at the start of this video, Los Angeles County Court Superior Court Judge Daniel M. Crowley granted Rachel the right to continue suing Tom and Ariana for eavesdropping and invasion of privacy, saying he was open to hearing arguments and putting forward some questions around the charge for intentional infliction of emotional distress. According to page 6, the judge stated, any person who is injured by an invasion of privacy violation is permitted to bring civil action against the person who committed the violation, adding that communication as used in this penal code is not limited to conversations or oral communications, but rather encompasses any communication, regardless of its form, where any party to the communication desires it to be confined to the parties thereto. So, if the Act covers eavesdropping on or recording of a telephone call, it surely covers the non-consensual recording of the most intimate and private form of communication between two people. So basically, despite Tom's attempts to say that the penal code only mentions sound or symbol-based communications, the judge, in my opinion, rightly stated that recording an intimate video of someone without their consent is eavesdropping, and so these charges will still stand and will be taken to trial. When it comes to the invasion of privacy charge, the judge stated that Rachel had sufficiently alleged a cause of action for intrusion against Tom, stating, Sandoval penetrated Leviss's zone of sensory privacy surrounding in violation of social norms, based on her allegation that Sandoval secretly recorded their private communications and captured sexually explicit footage of Leviss without her knowledge or consent. However, when it got to the charge for intentional infliction of emotional distress, the judge wasn't as confident about Rachel's argument. Instead, he considered Tom's demurrer, explaining that Rachel fails to allege her emotional distress was proximately caused by Sandoval's conduct, or that Sandoval's conduct, namely the alleged sexually explicit recordings, were made with the intention of inflicting injury to Leviss, or with the realization that injury would result from the act of recording Leviss. Continuing, Leviss's complaint alleges that the sexually explicit recordings were not disseminated by Sandoval, but rather discovered by Madix when she searched through Sandoval's phone when it purportedly fell from his pocket during a performance at Tom Tom, and that it was Madix, not Sandoval, who distributed and or showed the alleged sexually explicit videos to others without plaintiff's knowledge or consent. The judge then gave Rachel 20 days to amend her complaint and provide evidence for the allegations in order to prove that Sandoval's recording and failure to secure the pornographic videos of her led to her emotional distress. But where does this leave Tom and Ariana now? And what happens next in this lawsuit? As far as I understand it, Rachel's lawyers plan to file a new complaint that alleges that both Sandoval's recording of the call and his subsequent failure to secure the intimate video were reckless acts that led to Rachel's emotional distress. So I guess we'll have to wait the 20 days and see what happens next. I'll be watching closely to make sure I bring you an update as soon as there's more news on this case, as court dates are set, more complaints are filed, and more verdicts reached. In the meantime, if you're new here and you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe to join our growing community of Bravo addicts and turn on notifications so you can be notified of every update in this juicy courtroom drama, even as VPR Season 11 leaves our screens for another season. I'll also be putting out more content on all your other favourite reality favourites like Summer House, The Valley, and the new season of Real Housewives of New Jersey, so make sure you stay tuned. If you can't wait until then, head over to our Vanderpump Rules playlist to catch up on the story so far. Thanks for watching.